J. Huffsnyder, occurring on June the 4th, 1977 on Captiva Island. We are located at 6611 West Captiva Drive because sometimes during this talk there are references to where we are now. Joe, what was your full name?
Joseph Wightman.
And where did you come from and when?
I came across from the state of Washington in 1917, that is during World War I. My folks bought what used to be the old Bates place on Captiva Island.
Where was the Bates place?
The Bates place was between Knowles and William Bryant's.
Was this on the Gulf or the bay side of the island?
It was from Bay to Gulf. It was
From Bay to
across
Gulf.
the strip.
What was your father's name?
George Sherman Wightman.
And what was your mother's
My
name?
mother's name was Cora Alice Ritchie Wightman. Her grandfather homesteaded right on the other side of Fort Myers. They named the place after him, Fort Ritchie.
How many were in your family when you came here, Joe?
There was, since my older brothers was already in service, and my oldest sister was stayed with one of my aunts going to high school, there was myself and older sister and a younger brother that was school age on when we got to Captiva Island.
Were there any younger than school age?
Yes, that would be my youngest brother, Richie. He was not old enough to go to school yet at that time. He was practically a baby.
Is Richie still alive?
No, he was lost in the North Sea when he was, I guess what you call merchant marines. He gave up Navy service and was on a merchant marine boat when he was.
And what was he, swept overboard?
Overboard is near, yes.
Were those the only ones in your family? Were there any older ones?
Well, there was 8 children altogether. There was, my mother didn't raise any 4Fers. She had 3 older sons in the World War I, myself and 2 younger brothers that was in World War II.
I'll be darned.
So,
when you got to the island, about how many people were living here?
about somewhere between 40 and 60 people.
Did that including kids?
Yeah, there was about a dozen and a half of those where it would have been children.
Would have been children.
See, at that time, the people raised larger families than on the average and what they do nowadays.
Sure. What did these people do who lived here then? What kind of occupation?
Farmers and fishermen. The only winter homes on this island was what we called winter homes. Residence at that time was through what we called Dickeyville, and then of course the Bayview Hotel operated in the wintertime, and of course Snyder School operated just seasonal through.
Yes. Where was Dickeyville?
Dickeyville would be from where Belton Johnson lives now, south to Twin Waters, which was belonged to Price at that time, and it was.
When you first came here, it belonged to Price?
I'm not sure that it did. He may have come in about that time or shortly after and built those cottages.
And where was the school?
The school was, Belton Johnson built his house over part of the same foundation where the Snyder Schoolhouse used to be, and where the Island Store is now. That used to be a 2-story building, and that was the barracks for the part of the boys. It really belonged to Bayview Hotel, but the Snyder School had it leased or rented
as a boarding place?
Yes, as a annex to the boarding school.
And where was the hotel?
The hotel would be well, they built some condominiums on part of the ground where the hotel burned down, and it would be about about 40 yards north of Andy's Pier.
I
You
see.
know where that would be about.
Yeah. Were there any people living on Buck Key?
Yes, there was about 5 families living over there. There was 3 grapefruit groves. I think Armsby was the probably the largest one, and Captain Smith owned one just north of Armsby's, and then from there back the other way was Knowles's property, and the where the Roosevelt Channel makes that abrupt turn across to Buck Key and then back to Captiva. You see that channel was dredged in there for steamboats to come through, and that curve was put in there so as it would pass Armsby's dock, so they used that as a point of shipment from Buck Key.
So that dock was located right where that curve
Yes.
occurs?
A person might find some of the submerged piloting under the ground if he wanted to go in there and probe for them. You know, the bugs haven't eaten them all up.
Were there any people...
And the foundation of the cistern is still there, because bottle hunters was found that not long ago.
Were there any people living on Upper Captiva?
There, the northern end of the island at that time, there may have been a family of fishermen living at the cove, but the homesteaders that had homesteaded the north end of the island, right at the Captiva Pass, would have been Powell, and the next one on this side of there, it was Foster. And I see on the chart, I see where they've still got Foster Point written on some of these local charts. So you still see his name on the map.
And they had citrus groves up there?
There was no citrus groves up on the north end, although they had vegetable gardens. And the Foster had died just before I came to the island. He went about into the second week without coming to the post office to pick up his mail. He usually came down once or twice a week. Of course, he traveled by foot, would walk down. So his neighbor this way from there, Tobe Bryant, got worried and went up to see if he was sick or something, and found him dead out in the garden with one shoe and one sock off. And of course he had been dead for a few days and had commenced to bloat, so they couldn't run a thorough autopsy at that time. But anyway, that was a little bit of a mystery, but what caused his death.
Now, you mentioned that you were of school age. You went to school here. Where was the school and who taught it?
The school was what's left of the school building. It was built onto and made the chapel by the sea. The school teacher's name was, well, we called her Captain Fadley, because at that time it was a little bit odd for a woman to have skipper's papers as well as school teachers.
She had captain's papers?
Yes. Well, so, of course, that was before all these jokes come out about that Tugboat Annie, and but originally, I guess it wasn't very often that there was women captains.
Was she married?
Yes, and her husband was just the reverse than what she was. She was such a robust woman and highly talented, and her husband was a a small, puny man that I think he had his back broke sometime or other because he couldn't even row a boat very far. And we used to would keep track of wind each time there was a recess, to keep track of wind driftage, so as to, when the school was out in the evening, she'd know which way to go to find her husband. If he wanted to go fishing, she would set him adrift in the morning and go teach school, and then go back after school hours and go find her husband to bring him back home, because he couldn't even crank the boat.
Now, you mentioned school. Do you remember any of the children who were in school with you?
I remember them. The Carter family, there was Bryant children and Mickles, and from down the other end of the island there was Sam Caraway's children, and Brian Fugit would come across from Buck Key. The following year, however, they moved the schoolhouse up to the other, further up the island, because they thought that that would be the way the population was shifting, would be near the central part of the children, and this schoolhouse they thought would be too small, so they built a bigger one up on the Shell Ridge that was about 1/2 mile west of where the Potter House has fallen off into the Gulf now. And the teacher that year was Robert Knowles. Robert Knowles is still living on Main Street down on Sanibel Island right now. He would be a good one to
yes, we ought to get in touch with him. What did you, when you children were out of school, what did you do for amusement?
Well, when we was out of school, that'd be in the summertime. Of course, there'd be usually in the summertime, the mosquitoes was way worse than anybody's known any mosquitoes here lately, and we had our choice of either shelling or fishing. If you get out over the water a little ways, why you can get them shooed off, the mosquitoes, or if you get out on the white beach. And it would be hard to visualize, but the beach then compared with us not having any beach now. Because you see, from Gulf Drive to Dickey's, between where the road washed away and the Gulf, we used to be a landing strip where the airplanes landed.
That long ago?
Yes.
Well, did you?
That is first. At that time, the airplanes that anybody would take up passengers with was the old Jenny, the World War I version of an army plane, which would sure look like an antique if you'd see any of them today.
Did you kids play any games? What kind of games?
We played last tag quite a bit, and we even played scrub baseball. Anything that we played with was homemade equipment. There was no school equipment. We wrapped rags around a ball of cotton and made the baseball, and used homemade bats to play scrub baseball with.
Did you do any fishing as kids?
Yeah, the fish was. I think I probably caught more fish, that is, to take home than any other person of our immediate family. The one that I remembered very closely or largely was I caught a redfish one time when I got it home.
Where'd you catch it?
I caught it off of Dickey's Pier, which projected into the Gulf. And it was, I was small of my age, and that, when a couple smaller fish was about all I could carry. So about the time I got ready to leave the dock, I met one of the neighbors. His name was Charlie Burse. The way he homesteaded the swamp was on this side of Carter's and on the bay side, this little piece that projects out into the bay here, later sold to Chadwick.
Mm-hmm.
And he asked me, he says, "Do you get all the fish you wanted?" And instead of saying had all I wanted, I says I had all I could carry home, because I never did get home with more fish than what we could use. We was always, because we practically lived from what fish we could get and from out of our garden. We didn't have very many ways of earning money. And
well, did you eat other things off the land? Did you eat gophers, for example?
yes, we. I was rather small to swamp out a cabbage, but because that was something that they, well, a full-grown man could swamp them out between 10 and 15 minutes. But if I'd cut out a cabbage at that time, why, I felt like I did a half day's work. After all, I was just a small of my age, you see, and I was only 9 years old when I came to the island, or about that.
Yes. Now, did you eat raccoons?
I've eaten raccoon and liked that. Raccoons was native here. Some of these other animals that we have now, like the possum and the armadillo and the rooting squirrel, were not native here. They were brought here later. Probably somebody helped them across to get here.
How did you cook raccoons?
Raccoons were good baked, and somebody that was really, really good at it had a way of parboiling them before baking them. And the time that we camped in the grapefruit groves, where we'd pick grapefruit groves, the natives at that time cooked up and everything they had in one big pot over an open campfire, and we'd put a coon in there and boil it until it just about ready to fall to pieces, and of course the fat would come up, and then we'd pour in enough rice for the last 15 to 20 minutes of it cooking, enough rice to absorb that coon grease. That way we didn't let it go to waste. And I mentioned camping. At that time, people didn't have any way of traveling other than a horseback or a foot. So if people went somewhere to work out a grove, they camped right at the grove until they had it worked out, or had the contract filled of whatever amount of fruit that the farmer had bargained for.
And then you'd stay there overnight?
We'd stay right there until, yes, we'd only come home on weekends.
Did they have a name for this pot of stuff that they...
We called it purlood, cooking, yes. I don't suppose it was an awful lot of difference in what some of the jambalaya or Ozark stew or something. People had their own names for it, because we would, of course, use, if we had other vegetables like a sweet potato or something, we'd throw that right in and cook it up at the same time, or even turnip or whichever happened. And
were there a lot of coons on the island?
If anything, there's more coons on the island now than there was then, because at that time they kept them trapped down thinner, and those that were there were in better shape. Here a few years ago, I see on them, I guess that was almost 16 years ago now, the year that the robins came in here real thick. They, I think, helped starve the coons to death at that time. Coons was falling dead at various places. Now the coon eats the fruit off of the sable palm, which is related to a date tree. And the coon has to eat those things by the paws full to get enough to eat, where the robins pick them off one at a time. So when they were working competitive for the same feed, Why, the robins could stay fat, and the coons at that time of year, that's all they had to eat, would starve to death.
And then they died. The robins
Yeah.
killed off the coons.
Yeah, well, these things run in the cycle. I've seen the same thing happen in our fish. About every time we have real good fishing, it's usually followed by a red tide. And then we go through the lean season like we just now have. We haven't had good fishing since last October, just before the October
Yes.
red tide, until just now, a few coming back that are good to eat.
When you were a child, did you trap stone crabs?
No, we got a few of them that for our own personal use, but they apparently people didn't think of them as a market, or else the market hadn't moved in for them. They were probably as thick out there then as they are now, but people just didn't know about them, or else didn't think of them as being a marketable food.
Thing. Did you ever eat alligator?
Yes, we are sometimes referred to the alligator as rump steaks, because the best part of the alligator is his tail muscles. You cut them crossways. The alligators never did get too thick during my time out here, because if one got to be over 6 feet long or so, usually somebody went hunting him, because their hides had good value, and of course they cut those tail muscles crossways thin, and can fry them as near as any marketable thing that you would eat. They come nearer tasting like pork chops than anything else that I.
Were the alligators the same as they are now, or have they changed?
Not necessarily changed, because we have two different breeds of alligators here. One we call the red-eyed alligator, and then the regular alligator. The regular alligator gets to be the largest, but the red-eyed alligator, some people refer to him as American crocodile. He's a little bit sassy. He won't get out of your way as quick as the big alligator will.
How could you distinguish between them?
The red eye is one way. If you happen to be shining their eye with the light, one of them will give off a reddish glow. The other one is in daytime. The upper jaw swings on the one with the round nose, and the lower jaw on the other. So it's a
They swing different. They swing different ways.
Mouth opens from the bottom side on one, so his entire head has to go up and down as he opens and closes his mouth. Where the other one,
How would you kill alligators in those days?
My father killed one time with an axe. Met it in the cornfield and hit it in the head with an axe. But the professional hunters that'll hunt alligators will go down into the alligator's den, and with some kind of a hook, and get them to bite onto a hook and hook into their jaw, and then they have a crew of men on the outside pulling the rope, so as they eventually they'll tire him out, so he'll straighten out, and we'll pull him out. And the nose can be tied shut with just a little bit of a packing string if they want to move them alive, whereas they may have a tremendous biting power. They don't have power to open their mouth. You could hold their one man could probably hold the mouth shut on the largest alligator in the Everglades.
I didn't know that.
Well, I bet a lot of these people that wrestle them down there, like the Seminole Indian that gives that demonstration, I bet he knows it.
He must, or he wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Well, where was the road when you first came here, Joe?
When I first came to the island, there wasn't a surveyed road other than just this street here and Palm Avenue and one down through Dickey's. But while I was here, they surveyed the Palm Avenue, not Palm Avenue, Gulf Drive completely around both islands near the Gulf. And
you mean
now,
Sanibel and Captiva?
there's both Sanibel and Captiva. Every bit of the original Gulf Drive on Sanibel is gone. They've moved it back, some places about a quarter of a mile from where it used to be. And all that's left of the original, on the original survey on Captiva is from just out from our Captiva post office down to the first S-curve on the headed south.
That was the original road.
That was
How
all
far
that's
did
left.
that road go north?
It went right on across what is now North Captiva,
How far on North Captiva did it go?
all the way to Captiva Pass. See, that Redfish Pass broke through in 1921.
Well, to get from Sanibel to Captiva, was Blind Pass closed or was there a bridge?
There has always been a pass right up until right lately. That is during my lifetime, and I don't know how much longer before. The first bridge was built there at about the same time they made that survey that we was talking about. But that bridge,
Where was that bridge?
that bridge was a quarter of a mile further southwest from where the bridge is now, on the same angle as if you was looking straight back toward into Pine Island Sound. Those things would have went straight, and it would have went straight even another 50 yards or so past the first bridge before it started to swing back west.
Well, would that have come in on what we call Silver Key?
The Silver Key was a peninsula of Sanibel.
Oh,
It was,
I see.
And Arthur Caraway farmed that. If you go out on Silver Key, you'll probably still find some of his sweet potato rows and little ridges that he left in the ground.
Well, what happened to that bridge? How big was it?
It was a one-lane bridge, and the reason why they put it down that far at the time is if they put it any further this way, they would have had to put it a drawbridge, because there was navigable waters as far as Hal Fryson's landing, and Hal Fryson's, where the oyster cottages are?
Yes.
That artesian well that's behind the oyster was the oyster cottage. They call them white herring cottages the last year or so. Was in the center of Hal Fryson's grapefruit grove.
And the bridge was in that area then?
The bridge came in just on the south side of his dock. Now, that's hard to visualize now because the dock's gone, the bridge is gone, and the half of what would been his property is gone. As that
Yes.
Gulf is whipped in there.
Did that bridge wash out, or did they tear it out?
It washed out in 26 hurricane, and they moved this way and built a second wooden bridge, which would be right alongside of the concrete bridge that's there now.
Was that bridge to the north or south of the concrete bridge?
It would be just barely on the south side, and the east end they used the same approach. On the Well, on the west end, the old approach washed away, and they put some rocks all around there, or else that end of the bridge would probably been washed away too by now.
Well, was that second wooden bridge, was that big enough for 2 cars?
No, it was still only be one car traffic. Yeah, they might have made it a foot or so wider than the first bridge, but it wasn't wide enough for normal cars to pass. Although there was 2 cars passed onto it just to show that they could. One of them was an Austin, and the other one was a Crosley, I think. 2 of those little English-made cars passed.
Of course, you didn't have many cars here when you came, did you?
When I came to the island, there was no cars on the island at all. And the very first car that came was an old 4-cylindered Cadillac that had the back end taken off and a box arrangement built on there so as they could buck grapefruit crates out of the grapefruit groves. They could use that and make a little bit better time than they thought than they could with a mule cart. After the mule, Knowles's mule died, he got that and fixed it up to buck fruit with. It would put about a 6 or 7 crates of grapefruit in the back end and move them from the out in the grove to wherever they had to put them on a lighter or on a boat.
Now, how did they cultivate the vegetables in groves here? Was that all done by hand?
That was done to begin with by mules and horses. The very first tractor that came on this island would pull a 112-inch bottom plow, which would be about what one mule would pull. It was ranged very much like a 5-horse David and Bradley from Sears Roebuck that the small truck farmers use nowadays, you know, to do one row at a time arrangement.
And who brought the tractor over here?
It came on the steamboat, and
what steamboat?
Gladys was one of the Kinsey Company's boats, Kinsey Brothers, and it was such an important thing to changing of events on the islands that they dismissed the school or took all the school children down to see it assembled, and Kinsey lent us one of his engineers by the name of Arthur Gibson to help put it together, because they weren't sure that we had enough mechanically minded people on the island to follow the blueprint to assemble a thing like that. You see, it came in boxes or in crates, so it was assembled after it was delivered to the island.
Now that Arthur Gibson you mentioned, is he the one who just died a few years ago?
He died just a few years ago. He'd been the engineer for the Kinsey companies for several years. Steam engine. He was a steam engine engineer, which was almost a thing of the past now. I guess there's a few steam engine men around, but most everybody nowadays is either diesel or gasoline men.
Yes. Well, did Arthur Gibson stay on the island after he assembled this tractor? Did he live here?
He had lived here before that, and he lived here again since then. But he was the same fellow that had a surprise storm sink one of the small mailboats over at Wolfert one time, and he fixed up a block and tackle into the mangroves and rolled it up high enough and bailed it out and delivered the mail wet, and the people objected, and they found out what he had did, and then he won a sort of a plaque from the United States Post Office Department, highly complimenting him for going ahead and making deliveries regardless.
Now you knew him well in those days then.
Yes, I had one odd thing happen with him. While we was putting that tractor together, they didn't have any nipple on the gas tank. So in order to get the gasoline from the gasoline tank down to the mixing valve of the engine, they punched a little round hole in the tank and put the gas line directly into it and soldered up around it. And he couldn't figure out, someone says, well, I can't get the solder to stick. And he says, if you get it clean enough, it'll stick. But he says, I've used borax for cleaning flux. And then he says, I wonder if he sent me to the kitchen to get some baking soda. He says, maybe that'll do it. So I went over and asked Mrs. Sanchez for some baking soda, and I come back and we got it cleaned real good with baking soda. The next time the solder stuck. And I remembered that as until about 45 years later, he was helping Alan Nave when they run out of cleaning flux on their pipe, and I said, well, get some baking soda out of the kitchen and use that. It'll work. And then I happened to think I was telling the same fellow back that had told it to me the first time.
Many years before.
Yes, it was, he helped Alan Nave as a plumber.
Yes.
After there wasn't any more steamboats for him to run.
Now, you told me something else, though, that I'd like to know about. You said the school was moved to the north end of the island, not the building. They built one down.
Just that they built another building. That was a county. You see, this building down here was only half as big as it is now. This one down here was stretched out and enlarged.
Well, what happened to the first building, to the building that was down at the north end?
They moved it around after the land washed away that it was on, and they moved it back on solid land a few times. Finally, Chadwick claimed it for salvage, and moved it around up into what is now South Sea Plantation, and built onto it and remodeled it a little bit, made it into a dwelling house. It was later called the Huckleberry Cottage.
Do you think it's still there?
Parts of it is still there, because just a few years ago I recognized part of it as I was cutting through putting in outlets when I was wiring the place. And it would be
what do you think is the oldest building on the island?
That would be a little bit difficult for me to know, whether it would be parts of the chapel by the sea, or whether it would be the inner part of the where the kitchen is at the South Sea Plantation, because that was built right onto Jess Carter's house. So some of these buildings down here in Dickeyville has been here a long time. And Stella Mitchell's house, after 26 hurricane, she says to examine her sills and things and see if it was still in good shape. And I went through there and pecked on those stringers and things, and they sounded just as solid and firm, and it's all heart lumber, so there's no termites or anything ever got into it.
How long has that house been here?
At that time, she had, I asked her that. I says, how long has this been here? At that time, she figured that her father had built it there 54 years prior to that time. And I says, well, unless something else happens to it, I says, as far as I'm concerned, it can be there that much longer, because everything seemed to be solid and firm. And
yes.
The drift bolts might be the first thing to go. Where the salt water got onto them, they might rust away. But as far as the wood that was built out of, the heart pine is still just as
good.
solid and firm as can be.
Are there any houses left from the original settlers here?
I doubt it very much, because the what you call the first settlers didn't even build houses out of wood. They come in and thatched huts until they could get a crop to get some money crop from.
Well, then would they build out of lumber, or would they make their own lumber here?
They had to import the lumber on this island because there was no trees here hardly that would make lumber. There was only a couple pine trees on the island when I first came here. By the way, these Australian pines are not native to Florida at all. They were imported here. The very first ones on this island was put here by Mrs. Dickey, and then the next ones was planted all around the Gulf Drive on the both sides of the road. Doc Turner was the road commissioner at that time, and he says that the pedestrians should have a place to duck. Those trees grew very fast. They compared with other trees, but they don't make good lumber. They would have to be made into lumber almost the same day you cut them, or else the sap would set, so the saw wouldn't cut them. And then in the 5 years' time, they're so puffy they're falling to pieces with decay. So they don't make good lumber.
Of course, they didn't have cement block then, did they?
They bought cement from someplace. I think some of the first cement I seen here was coming from Chattanooga, and they could mix cement, and some of that cement that they made out of salt water and sand, local sand, is still tough blocks to when you try to break them up. Matter of fact is, I think that sometimes the longer the set, the harder they get. But of course, the natives didn't have that to build with. In 1925 and 1926, I mixed most of the cement that went into this house that looks like a Spanish ark down here,
yes,
with a hand-cranked cement mixer, and that's about 1 to 16 mixture. The fellow wanted something to resemble the Spanish adobe, just something that would stand there.
Who built that house?
George Fenton.
George Fenton?
Yeah.
Well,
the fellow that did the carpenter work for the farms, his name was James French, and he says that was against his grain as a carpenter to build a house wrong side out and then tear it, as he's building those forms, for all that.
Then have to tear
it right out to the minute that they poured the cement and thought, long enough to cement to set, and then pull the forms.
Well, you did a good job, because that house has now stood there for over 50 years.
Yeah, well, the roof had to be replaced. They put that asphalt and tar or whatever the mixture is and rock roof on there, and it becomes brittle and cracks. So I don't know what that was the weakness of, seems like, of all flat top roof buildings.
So only the roof has been replaced on that?
Yeah, well, the stringers that hold the roof are still what we put in there, but the surface that they put on top of the decking is what they had to replace.
Well, we've talked for quite a while this morning, Joe. I think we ought to take a little break and have a glass of ice water, and then maybe we can continue with some of it. Is that all right with you?
Yeah, okay.